She thought marrying the man she loved would finally bring her peace, a stable home, a loving partner and a future for her little boy. But just days after his sudden death, Maria found herself standing in the pouring rain with her 3-year-old son Eli clinging to her leg, as her in-laws slammed the heavy iron gates behind them. No sympathy, no shelter, just bruises, a torn suitcase and the cruel words still echoing in her ears. "You were never one of us." Left to wander the cold streets, heartbroken and humiliated, Maria didn't know where her next meal would come from, or if her child would survive the night. But as she curled up on a park bench and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, a stranger noticed them, one man quietly watching from the shadows, who saw more than just a homeless mother and child. What happened next would spark a chain of events that no one, especially her in-laws, ever saw coming, because what they discarded in arrogance, someone else recognized as gold. And Maria, she was about to rise in a way that would leave the very people who broke her begging to be let back into her life. Maria Delgado had grown up in the kind of town people forgot existed: one diner, one gas station, and a bus that came twice a week, if it came at all. Her father had left when she was 9, and her mother passed away when she was 17, leaving Maria to raise herself. By the time she turned 22, she was working 2 jobs, morning shifts at a local cafe and late nights cleaning offices in the city, saving every penny not for luxury, but for survival and maybe, just maybe, a future with more than just struggle. She never expected love to come waltzing into her life in a sharp suit and a smile that made her forget to breathe. Andrew Caldwell had walked into the cafe like he owned the world, and to be fair, in many ways he did. Son of a prominent real estate tycoon, Andrew was used to commanding rooms, not ordering pancakes in small-town diners. But that day he had chosen a corner booth, taken one look at Maria's kind eyes and tired smile, and asked for a coffee and conversation. What started as a brief flirtation quickly became something deeper. Andrew returned to that diner every weekend, sometimes just to sit in Maria's section and listen to her talk about books she wanted to read, or the little garden she kept behind her apartment building. She found herself laughing more, sleeping better, and for the first time in years dreaming again. 6 months later he proposed with a small diamond and a promise: "We'll build our own world, Maria. We don't need anyone else." She believed, but not everyone was happy about the engagement. The Caldwell family, the picture-perfect embodiment of generational wealth and snobbery, made their opinions clear from the moment Andrew introduced Maria to them. Margaret Caldwell, Andrew's mother, didn't bother to hide her disdain. She had looked Maria up and down like she was sizing up a charity case. No pedigree, no education, no legacy, Margaret had said behind Maria's back, though not quietly enough. "He's throwing his future away for a waitress with pretty eyes." Andrew's father, Charles Caldwell, was no better. He didn't speak much to Maria directly. He didn't need to. His cold stare and dismissive tone said it all. To the Caldwells, Maria was a stain on their pristine family name. Still, Andrew didn't back down. He walked away from the family business, turned down his trust fund, and married Maria in a simple garden ceremony, attended only by her friends from the cafe, a few neighbors and one of Andrew's cousins, who didn't care about social rank. The Caldwells were not present. They sent no gift, no message, not even a card. But that day, Maria didn't care. She stood in a lace dress bought off the sale rack, holding Andrew's hands, staring into the eyes of the man who chose her over wealth, status and comfort. For a brief moment the world felt right. They moved into a modest townhouse in the city, far from the Caldwell estate, and began their life together. When Maria discovered she was pregnant, Andrew cried tears of joy. They named their son Elijah, Eli for short, and he became the center of their universe. The first year was hard. Andrew struggled to find steady work without his family's connections, and Maria had to return to waitressing sooner than she wanted. But love lived in that little townhouse, in bedtime lullabies, in laughter over burnt dinners, in the quiet way Andrew kissed Maria's forehead when she fell asleep holding Eli. Then came the night everything changed. It was raining when Andrew left to run a quick errand, just a drive to the pharmacy to pick up some cold medicine for Eli. Maria had offered to go, but Andrew insisted. "You need rest," he said with a smile. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. He never returned. The crash was sudden. A speeding truck on a slick road. No chance to swerve. No chance to say goodbye. Maria received the call at 10:47 p.m. She remembered the exact minute, because she'd just finished humming Eli to sleep. When she dropped the phone, it shattered, just like her world. The days that followed were a blur of hospital paperwork, funeral arrangements, and sleepless nights. She moved through the motions like a ghost. Eli, too young to understand death, kept asking when Daddy was coming back. Maria couldn't answer. Every time she looked into her son's eyes, she saw Andrew's smile and it broke her all over again. She expected grief. She didn't expect cruelty. The Caldwells didn't send condolences, not a single flower or word. Instead, just 3 days after the funeral, Maria received a letter, formal and cold. It stated that the townhouse Andrew had leased was under Caldwell Property Holdings, and that the lease had been terminated. She had 7 days to vacate. Stunned, Maria called the Caldwell estate. Gregory Caldwell, Andrew's older brother, answered. "Oh, it's you," he said with a sigh. "Look, Maria, we were gracious long enough. You were never supposed to be part of this family. Now that Andrew's gone, there's no reason to keep pretending. You're evicting me, your nephew?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's not a Caldwell, not officially, and frankly, neither of you belong here." The phone went dead. Maria stood there in her kitchen, holding her son in one arm and the eviction notice in the other, unable to speak. The home she built with Andrew was being stripped away, piece by piece. First his life, now their shelter. She tried to reason. She called again, pleaded, begged, but no one cared. A week later, with 2 suitcases and Eli clutching a worn teddy bear, Maria stepped out into the cold morning air. The townhouse door shut behind her with a final echoing click. She looked back one last time, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. No one came to help. No one from Andrew's family even looked her way. What she didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that fate wasn't done with her yet, because somewhere in the city, a stranger was about to cross her path. A man with power, influence, and a heart that had once been broken too. And for Maria and Eli, that one encounter would change everything. A week after the funeral, Maria received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was clipped and formal. An assistant to Charles Caldwell, Andrew's father. "You are requested at the Caldwell estate at noon tomorrow," the woman said. "The family would like to discuss arrangements." Arrangements. The word floated in Maria's mind like a shred of hope. She had spent the last few nights in their now vacated townhouse, sleeping on the floor with Eli curled against her chest. Most of their things were gone, moved into storage by a company the Caldwells hired without asking. All she had was a duffel bag, with Eli's clothes, a half-full can of formula, and enough money for maybe 2 days of groceries. She thought maybe, just maybe, they were ready to be civil. Maybe grief had softened them. Maybe they'd finally see Eli as part of their blood, as the last piece of their son. But nothing could have prepared her for what actually happened. The Caldwell estate stood like a palace atop a hill, the stone facade soaked in gray clouds and prestige. Maria hesitated at the iron gates, holding Eli's hand as he clutched a toy car. A guard buzzed her in without a word. The long driveway stretched like a warning. Inside, everything was as Maria remembered. Cold marble floors, towering ceilings, chandeliers that looked like they'd cost more than her childhood home. A maid silently led her to the study, where the family waited like judges behind a polished oak desk. Margaret Caldwell sat upright in a navy blazer, her hair perfectly pinned, her expression like carved ice. Gregory Caldwell lounged on a leather chair, sipping from a crystal glass, eyes glinting with disdain. Charles stood by the window, his back to every. Maria offered a polite nod and lifted Eli into her arms. "Thank you for having us." Margaret's lips curled slightly. "We're not here for pleasantries." Maria's throat tightened. "I was hoping we could talk about Eli, about support. He's your grandson, Gregory Scott. We're not paying child support to a woman who trapped our brother with a baby." Maria blinked. "What?" Margaret stood slowly, walking around the desk like a queen delivering a decree. "We never accepted your arrangement with Andrew, and now that he's gone, you no longer have any place in this family." "I'm not asking for luxury," Maria said, voice trembling. "Just a place to stay for a while. For Eli. He's grieving too." Gregory smirked. "He won't even remember Andrew in a few years." Maria's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked to Charles for reason, for anything, but he remained silent, still staring out the window as though the conversation bored him. I loved Andrew, she whispered. We were building a life together. He would never want his son, your grandson, left with nothing. You think we believe he was happy, Margaret hissed. You were his mistake. We tolerated it while he was alive. But now, that chapter is closed. Maria stepped back, cradling Eli, who had gone still in her arm. Please, she said. You don't have to accept me, but at least help your grandson. Gregory stood abruptly. I've heard enough. Before she could react, he crossed the room, yanked the front door open, and gestured outside. Out. Maria blinked in disbelief. You're serious? He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the small backpack Eli had set on the floor and hurled it out the door into the muddy gravel. Out, he shouted, his voice booming. Maria gasped as she turned to shield Eli. She took one step back, then another until she was at the threshold. The rain had begun to fall in thick, heavy drops, soaking her blouse in seconds. She turned to say something, anything, but the door slammed in her face. The echo of the door shutting rang louder than the thunder rolling through the sky. She stood frozen, shivering, stunned. The cold pierced through her clothes, but it was the humiliation that made her knees buckle. Eli whimpered softly against her chest. She picked up his backpack. It was soaked through. His extra clothes, his favorite coloring book. She walked unsure of where to go, down the driveway, and past the estate gates, now locked behind her like a cell. The city seemed darker than usual, the rain slicing across her face like punishment. Cars rushed by without slowing down. Horns honked. No one saw her. No one cared. With no money, no job, and no home, she had no destination, only a small child in her arms, and heartbreak cracking beneath her ribs. She wandered into the city streets, her shoes squelching with each step, her arms burning from holding Eli tight. He didn't cry, just clung to her in silence, sensing something far more frightening than the rain. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind gray towers, leaving the city drenched in streetlight shadow. Maria tried knocking on a shelter's door, but they were full. Come back in the morning, the woman said, barely glancing at her. By the time she reached the park, she could barely feel her legs. The benches were slick with water, but they were the only dry place left that didn't ask for rest. She chose the one beneath the oak tree, wrapped Eli in her jacket, and sat down. Her stomach growled. She tried not to cry. Mommy, Eli whispered, touching her cheek. Why did they yell at you? Maria bit her lip, blinking away tears. Some people forget how to be kind, babe. I miss Daddy, I know, she whispered. I miss him too. She kissed his forehead, and tucked him under her arms, listening to the city breathe around them. Her heart thudded in her ear. She felt invisible, disposable, like all her years of love, loyalty, and motherhood were worth nothing to the Caldwells. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a daughter-in-law. She wasn't even a person in their eyes. As her eyelids grew heavy, her mind whispered a desperate prayer into the wind. Please, let someone see us. Let someone help. And somewhere, not far away, someone did see them. A sleek black car slowed near the curb. A man in a wool coat looked out from the back seat, eyes narrowing as he spotted the woman huddled on the bench with a child in her arms. He tapped the driver's shoulder. Pull over, he said, because something about that sight, a mother in the rain, dignity dripping from her soaked hair, felt familiar, too familiar, and he couldn't turn away, not this time. That night, the park had never felt colder. The trees rustled with wind and drizzle, and each gust cut through Maria like knives of ice. Her arms ached from holding Eli so tightly, but she dared not loosen her grip. He was still shivering. She had wrapped her only coat around his tiny frame, trying to protect him from the rain, from the night, from the world. Eli had stopped asking questions. Now, he just laid his head against her chest, his breath warm and shallow. His damp curls stuck to his forehead, and every so often, his small body gave a tiny involuntary shiver. Maria felt helpless. She rocked him gently, back and forth, whispering the same words over and over, like a prayer. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to be like this. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. What was the point? She had nothing left to pretend for. The world passed by. Joggers, dog walkers, couples with umbrellas. Most averted their gaze, too uncomfortable, or distracted to care. To them she was invisible, a soggy silhouette on a bench, a problem for someone else to solve. But then someone stopped. A man, tall and lean, slowed his pace near the edge of the path. He had a leash in one hand, and a golden retriever trotting beside him. He was dressed like any jogger, hoodie damp from the mist, gray sweatpants, and running shoes speckled with mud, but it was his eyes that stood out, not because they were piercing or intense, but because they held something so rare, it startled Maria. Kind. He looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her. "You all right?" he asked gently. Maria hesitated, then shook her head. Her lips trembled, and her throat closed up. She wanted to be strong, to say she had it under control, but what control? She was sitting on a public bench in the pouring rain with her 3-year-old son, wrapped in her coat. She had no job, no home, and no plan. The man didn't press her for answers. He looked at the boy in her arms, then back at Maria. Without another word, he gave a short nod, and walked away, his dog glancing back as they disappeared into the shadows of the park. Maria sighed. She hadn't expected help, but the brief interaction had stirred something inside her, an echo of decency she hadn't felt in days. 5 minutes later, she heard footsteps returning. The man reappeared, holding a brown paper bag in one hand, and a steaming drink carrier in the other. "I figured you might be hungry," he said, kneeling down slowly, so he didn't frighten her. "This one's cocoa, no caffeine. Sandwiches are turkey and cheese. Didn't know if your little one had allergies." Maria stared at the offerings in disbelief. Her pride fluttered weakly in protest, but her stomach and Eli's won the battle. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He handed her the cocoa first, then the sandwiches. Eli stirred at the smell, sitting up slightly. Maria gently unwrapped one and handed it to him. He took a bite, chewing slowly, his eyes brighter than they'd been all day. "My name's Victor Lane," the man said after a beat, sitting on the opposite end of the bench. "You need help?" Maria didn't answer right away. The question felt like a trap, like one she'd been asked before, only to be met with pity, judgment, or false promises. But something about Victor felt different. It wasn't just the kindness, it was the absence of pity in his tone. He wasn't talking down to her, he wasn't staring at her like a burden, he was just there. "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "We need help." Victor nodded, not pushing her to explain. Instead, he looked up at the rain-softened sky. "Life has a funny way of kicking us down just when we think we've found balance." Maria gave a sad smile. "Or when we have nothing left to lose. You got a place to go tonight?" She shook her head. He glanced at Eli. "That your boy? His name's Eli, he's 3. Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it gently across the bench. "I know this might sound weird, but I own a few apartment buildings around the city. One of them has a few empty furnished units. Not fancy, but clean and warm. You can stay there until you figure things out." Maria blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Victor paused, his expression softening. "Because years ago, I was sitting on a bench too, cold, hungry, just out of foster care. Some stranger gave me a warm place to sleep, and didn't ask for anything in return." He glanced at Eli. "I remember what it's like to be small and scared and not know where home is." Maria's hand trembled as she accepted the card. "Thank you." Victor stood and whistled for his dog, who barked once and wagged his tail. "There's a cab waiting near the park entrance. I'll walk you over. The driver knows where to take you. No strings, just rest." "Okay." Maria hesitated, her instincts battling fear, but something in her heart said trust him. She stood slowly, Eli in her arms, her knees weak but steady enough. Victor walked beside her silently, holding an umbrella over them. When they reached the cab, he helped her inside and handed the driver a folded note. "If you ever need anything, my number's on that card. No pressure, just, don't give up." Maria looked up at him, eyes welling. "Thank you for seeing us." Victor smiled. "Sometimes all people need is to be seen." The cab pulled away, and Maria leaned her head against the window, watching the park disappear into the night. Eli had already fallen asleep in her arms, clutching the cocoa cup with one hand, and his soggy toy car with the other. They didn't know it yet, but life had just pivoted on that park bench, and the man they met, Victor Lane, wasn't just a kind stranger. He was one of the youngest real estate millionaires in the state, and he was about to change everything. The guest house was small but cozy, tucked behind one of Victor Lane's many residential buildings in a quiet part of the city. It had 2 bedrooms, a little kitchen with new appliances, and warm light that poured in through the windows in the morning. For Maria, it might as well have been a castle. The night they moved in, she cried in the shower, not from sadness, but from the relief of standing under hot water that didn't run out, of finally locking a door that kept her in Eli's safe. She wrapped her son in a fluffy towel and sat on the bed, watching him sleep.
For the first time in weeks, his face looked peaceful. He was no longer cold or scared. She whispered a silent thank you to the man who had changed their lives with a paper bag and a cup of cocoa. Still, Maria's pride wouldn't allow her to sit idle. The day after they moved in, she knocked on Victor's office door and asked to speak with him. "You've already done so much," she said, standing nervously in front of his desk. "But I don't want to be a charity case. I want to work anything, cleaning, organizing, whatever you need." Victor looked up from his laptop and gave her that thoughtful gaze she was beginning to recognize. He could tell she wasn't just trying to be polite, she needed purpose, not pity. He nodded slowly. I could use someone to help organize my real estate files, field calls, maybe coordinate meetings. Nothing complicated, but important." Maria's face lit up. "Yes, I can do that." So she started the next morning. At first she was overwhelmed by the fast pace of the office. Victor's business wasn't small. It was a growing empire, with multiple property developments, renovation projects, and investor meetings scheduled constantly. But Maria didn't flinch. She arrived early, stayed late, and took notes like her life depended on. In less than a week she had memorized the names of every agent and contractor Victor worked with. In 2 weeks she was answering calls with calm authority, organizing schedules, and color-coding contracts. By the end of the month, she was proofreading agreements and noticing things even Victor had missed. "Are you sure this clause doesn't conflict with the city zoning code?" she once asked, holding up a draft lease agreement. Victor blinked. "Good catch. That would have been a disaster." She smiled shyly. "I used to study business books when Eli napped. It was just for fun." But Victor knew talent when he saw it. Maria wasn't just smart. She was strategic, intuitive, and fiercely dedicated. She could analyze a problem from all angles and offer a solution that made sense, not just on paper, but in people's lives. And outside of work, Maria was just as tireless. She helped her neighbors in the building, volunteered at Eli's school, and found ways to make the guest house feel like home. She stitched curtains from old linens, painted Eli's room with little stars, and filled their evenings with laughter again. Eli was thriving. He made fast friends at the nearby school, brought home finger paintings of smiling suns, and giggled every night at bedtime. The shadows that once haunted his eyes had lifted. He started calling Victor Mr. Vic, and insisted on showing him his drawings every Friday. Victor, meanwhile, found himself pulled into their world more than he had expected.
2 years had passed since that cold night in the park, the night Victor Lane had offered a hand when no one else would. 2 years of hard work, sleepless nights, and small victories. Now Maria stood in the middle of her own business. Eli & Co., an elegant interior design showroom that bore her son's name, a symbol of hope, resilience, and new beginnings. The grand opening was buzzing with excitement. The polished floors reflected crystal chandeliers and the walls were decorated with carefully curated artwork and furniture that showcased Maria's keen eye for style. Locals, journalists, and even a few real estate dignitaries were mingling through the bright, airy space. Maria moved gracefully among the guests, her smile genuine but measured. She was proud of how far she'd come, and of the little boy who was now confidently helping her greet visitors. Eli, dressed in a tiny suit that Maria had saved for special occasions, was chatting animatedly with a reporter, his laughter ringing clear and warm. Victor was there too, standing quietly by Maria's side. His presence was a steady reassurance, a reminder that even the toughest battles could be softened by kindness and belief. As Maria handed a glass of champagne to a local journalist, she caught sight of someone at the entrance. Margaret Caldwell. The air seemed to still. Margaret stepped inside, dressed in a tailored black coat, her expression unreadable but unmistakably intense. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on Maria. A hush rippled through the crowd. People whispered, curious and surprised by the unexpected visitor. Maria felt her pulse quicken but refused to show fear. She stood tall, her back straight, her heart armored in hard-won confidence. Margaret took a slow step forward, her eyes never leaving Maria's face. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said, her voice low but carrying across the room. "I saw you on the news, the story about your business. I didn't realize you've done all this." Maria's lips pressed together in a firm line. "I did, without you." Margaret's gaze softened for a moment as it drifted toward Eli, who was now standing beside his mother with the easy assurance of a boy who belonged. "He's our blood too," Margaret said quietly, almost pleading. I came to ask if you'd let Eli visit, to be part of the family. Maria's chest tightened. Memories of cold rejection, harsh words, and the night they were thrown out flooded back. The night spent shivering on park benches, the loneliness that felt endless. Victor moved silently to stand beside Maria, a subtle but firm shield. Maria looked directly at Margaret, her voice steady but filled with years of hurt and defiance. You cast us out like trash, she said. Eli doesn't need a family that only wants him when he's in the spotlight. Margaret's eyes flickered with a mix of regret and desperation, but Maria did not waver. He has a family, Maria said, gesturing gently toward Victor, who gave a small supportive smile. Eli reached up, taking his mother's hand in his own. His smile was bright, confident, and full of love for the life they had built together. The crowd watched in silence, witnessing a moment of painful truth and quiet triumph. Margaret took a step back, the weight of her own choices hanging heavy in the air. Without another word, she turned and left, the door closing softly behind her. Maria exhaled, relief and strength flooding through her. Victor squeezed her shoulder. You did great, she smiled, eyes shining. We did. That night, as the guests filtered out and the lights dimmed, Maria sat with Eli on the small sofa in the showroom's cozy corner. Mom, Eli said, do you think Grandma will come back? Maria hugged him tightly. No, baby, but that's okay, because we have each other, and we have so many people who love us. Eli's eyes sparkled as he snuggled closer. Maria looked around the room, feeling a deep sense of peace, not because someone had saved her, but because she had risen, because she had chosen who belonged in their lives. And for the first time in a long time, Maria felt whole. The end. Maria's journey began in heartbreak, betrayal and cold nights on park benches, but her strength, her love for her son, and the kindness of one unexpected stranger turned her fate around. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She proved that dignity isn't given by birthright or wealth, it's earned by resilience, courage, and compassion, and in the end, the same people who cast her out were forced to witness her rise. Victor didn't just help Maria stand again, he reminded her she'd always had wings. She just needed someone to see her worth. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful true-to-life stories like this. Would you have let the Caldwell family back into your life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the ones who are cast out become the ones the world can't ignore. Stay strong, stay kind, and keep watching Hidden Realities, where every story reveals something deep.